Dobro večer, dobrodošli. Imamo zadovoljstvo da večeras sa nama imamo umetnicu Taus koja dolazi i učestvuje u našoj izložbi Migracija umetnosti, umetnost migracija, da nam malo ispriča više o svom umetničkom radu, da predstavi svoj umetnički rad i da malo popričamo i u kontekstu ove izložbe migracije u okviru koje se nalazimo. Ja ću sad, nastavit ćemo razgovor na engleskom, tako da nadam se da ćete uživati. So, welcome Taus, welcome to Novi Sad and to our exhibition. So, you prepared for us your presentation of your work, so we will be delighted to see what you do and how you think artistically. And to maybe in the second part, we will talk a little bit about this exhibition and in terms of migration art and how your art also relates to that and how your way of thinking also relates to that. So we will start with a little bit explaining more about your artwork that is exhibited here in this exhibition.
So first of all, thank you very much. Thank you, Luca, for invitation. And thank you for making time today in the evening to come here. Yes, I usually, kind of the way I enjoy artist talks being structured is when they talk about methodologies and processes. How do people, my colleagues, arrive at different works? And that's how I structured also kind of this talk. A few words about Baida, and sort of word Baida means these very basic boats that illegal sturgeon fishermen use on the Caspian Sea. But if you switch the accents and say Baida, it sort of like becomes sort of false tales or lies, which I quite like that shift, not that I kind of push it all the time, but in a way the whole work is a fictional documentation of performance that never happened. It was filmed in Dagestan on the Caspian Sea. The audios, the text was scripted by another beautiful writer, Tim Etchels, and it was recorded in London with several actors, and then the audio was put together in Moscow. And it started off with me, I'm not going to show you the work, I hope you've sort of seen bits of it. And the work started from a trip to an island within the Caspian Sea that I take, an island called Chechen, where a lot of these fishermen live. And I was really struck by one story that our guide told us, who actually worked with the Ministry of Emergency Affairs, but sort of also kind of was friends with everyone and took us around. He said that when the boats capsize in the storm, these very basic fisherman boats, when you go out at sea, the fishermen tie themselves to the prow for several reasons. First, if they kind of lose their own sanity, so they don't drown themselves. And the second reason, so their families find their bodies and don't mourn and don't hope. And this was the first time I heard about hope, somebody speaking about hope as a negative thing. And I couldn't get it out of my, I don't know, mind, heart, or whatever other senses we use and where things sort of impact us. And I started thinking, how do I communicate these stories to, I was invited at the time to Venice Biennial. And I was thinking, shall I bring a boat? Shall I bring kind of these fishermen? But then it felt like a little bit of a masquerade, a little bit of kind of just a very empty gesture of not actually doing anything. So I decided to approach Tim Etchels, who's a wonderful artist, to write a script based on 70 pages of interviews that we've collected with all these illegal fishermen. So he wrote the script of 3 art connoisseurs trying to find that boat in the Caspian Sea. But basically, obviously, there was no boat, not the Caspian Sea, in the Venice Laguna. There was no boat really in Venice. It was just this documentation video uploaded on the website. So we talk about, you know, this could be any boat, how much interns are paid, are there interns, are there like actors, and things like that. So it's sort of, it weaves the way we look at art within sort of context of Venice Biennial, within context of large exhibition openings, but also very real stories of a lot of fishermen, and becomes this, I don't know, a work about absence and loss and bodies and boats lost in these collective sea waters, I can say. I think that's kind of a little bit about how I understand the work.
Yeah, but can you tell us a little bit, because it's very the reason why we selected it, because it sort of directly reflects to the visual images, visual representations of what we see. I mean, even in this exhibition about the capsized boat and the unknown fates of people crossing over great water lines. So, in terms of it's not a work that directly reflects migration crisis and migration stories, but those are very, very similar, a lot of interesting parallels that we can draw between your work and the migration line. So how do you see it? Have you thought about it after you made the artwork?
I mean, in a way, I think you answered your own question, but I can add a little bit more. Because very important work for me, forensic oceanography, Left to Die boat. When they track this Left to Die boat with a lot of people seeking refuge, and while the countries argue who should save them, kind of a lot of people just kind of drown. So that, and also kind of, it was at the time when that story was happening, and it was kind of my own paralysis. And I very clearly remember this time when I would open like, I don't know, 30 tabs on my Internet Explorer with news, thinking that I will go back and try to read it, but being unable to. And you know, kind of you wait until your computer crashes, and then you have to start anew in a way. So it's also this paralysis, this kind of horror of how much a life has become worth. And I think we're constantly kind of reliving these questions again and again. So in a way, it is imagining that this collective water is everywhere. It is mixing up different types of boats and different types of losses together. So I think it's very much informed about, like, with these sort of capsized boat, drowned people, whether it's a drowning because you chose a certain labor to feed your family, or whether it's drowning because you were trying to kind of find a life in safety. Yeah. Okay. We're moving into a very radically different work, because I think what I like to do in my practice, it's a methodological experiment. Every work is different. So I do jewelry, 8-9 meter balloons, circus performances, and I quite enjoy that jumping, because to me, it's I want to kind of try everything on one level, but on another level, when I start my research and when I interview people to understand what a work is, the form comes later very often. So what we see here, the work is called Mind of Serendipity. It's a set of body-oriented artifacts. Why I call it body-oriented artifacts? It's actually a term from my mother's article on traditional jewelry, because she wrote a lot about traditional jewelry as kind of a way of structuring your body, be it your spiritual body, be it your social body. So there are sort of markers of a world on you. Like, I don't know, for example, you remove a ring if your husband passes. So it marks a lot of things that traditional jewelry. So it started off with actually conversations with my mother, because we were reading her articles together on Zoom at some point. And it's a jewelry piece. It's an artwork, but also a jewelry piece that you can wear. And I very often think about full ecology of the work, like how would it function in the market, for example. This is why it's an unlimited, unsigned, numbered edition. It was commissioned by a center, France Material Centrum, and they sell it at production price. They don't earn anything because they're not a commercial sort of property. And this is why it was important to make it unlimited. So we avoid this system, this market system where we make 50 copies, a collector buys all 50, sits until the price rises, and then kind of sells more expensively. Because with this unlimited, it's like, it ensures that the price will always stay at production price, hopefully. But more importantly, the work, every pendant, in this jewelry piece references something, and to me it's a tool for new ways of navigating the world. Like, for example, one pendant, so if I walk, it's actually in a candy, so you have to put it in your mouth and sort of suck on it, and it becomes a sculpture for a mouth, because it's made from black porcelain, and it's a black walnut made from porcelain, so you also got to feel it in your mouth. And then that's how you wear it, and several pendants relate to, as I said, to different things, and I'll just talk about some of them. Like, for example, this one is called Morphic Resonance Compass, and you can open it and you take out this little star, and it relates, it's based on the ideas by Rupert Snyder, who wrote about morphic resonance, and it's this feeling, I guess, or sensorial navigation that the birds have, because they, this is how they know where to fly, to lay eggs, to die, to spend the winter, and it's my imagination that we might have that, you know, morphic resonance if we're aware of this. Another pendant, like for example the square one in the right corner, it's called remote synesthesia crystal. And it's based on this mirrors touch synesthesia, and it's a feeling like if you see someone hurt, you feel the pain because you have this kind of heightened empathy. But remote synesthesia, we made it up. So it's the same heightened empathy, the same way of empathizing with the world, but in a long distance. And one of my favorite ones that I'll tell you about in the right corner, it's called sync accord nuggets. And it's based on several phenomena. One is called steam engine effect, another one is called accidental plagiarism, and another one is called, I forgot, sorry, but they all mean the same. They describe when same ideas appear in the world simultaneously, but not as pleasures, but because people feel like the world. The inventions happen in the same way, and scientifically the same tunes are written, you know, by musicians, same artworks are made by artists, and it's just really this kind of feeling of time. So this little pendant is dedicated to this simultaneous feeling of the world. This particular work is called 4,224 square centimeters of Degas, and it looks like a bit of a, I don't know, soft ruins with some fabric, with some audios inside. And it was based on several conversations that I had it was commissioned by Musée Cantonal de Beaux-Arts. And I spoke to one curator, Camille, who told me about the fact that one of their pastels by Degas is missing a few parts. And I was just like, wow, who got it off? When? How much is a square centimeter of Degas might be worth now, you know, with the crazy market prices. Because he compared the pastel that they have and the Catalogue Raisonné, which was published after the artist's death. So that's how the work started. So the fabric elements that you see is these missing pieces. The numbers is the calculated missing square centimeters of Degas. And what you see on the ground are these, I don't know, maybe soft ruins, maybe melted walls of the museum, through which, in the cross-section of which, different stories of how artworks ended up in the museums are embroidered. Like a gift of a princess, a gift of an artist, or this watch was gifted to the wife of Winston Churchill when they visited Lausanne. So kind of ins and outs of the museums, which now kind of, there's a lot of museology about provenances of the works, like how works end up in the collections and so on. So it's these ins and outs which were derived from the archive of the museum, a letter archive of the museum. That we've gathered. And also it has two audio pieces. One, I call this this element a sort of a ceiling that you can put your head through, or like some sort of mattress, because a lot of my practice is also about, I don't know, scratching walls, pushing against things, seeing kind of things in hidden spaces. So you put your head through and that's what you hear. And it's a little bit like maybe termites, maybe water, maybe fire, but it's basically kind of all the fears of the museum collection keepers. Because when the museum moved into a new building, they didn't take like wooden plinth, for example, because being afraid of the pests. So yeah, very museological work indeed. And the second audio, maybe I'll skip it actually, it's basically about 20 minutes of different stories of how value of an artwork is formed. Like its price, or its or what it can be equivalent to. So it was written by a writer, and there are stories about trying to calculate how much a square centimeter of Degas would be worth. For example, there's a story about how a sale of an artwork prevented a theft, like a starvation of a family. You know, kind of what are the, what is on the scale very often when the work is bought and sold and exhibited, because sometimes there's much more than we can see.
Can I ask you something about that work? Because it's similar to what we are trying to do at the Gallery of Makačeva, is to deal a bit more than we used to do with contemporary artists, like communicating our own heritages and our parts of our collection that maybe not the most representative to display in permanent collections or so. What is your experience are the historical museums that are not contemporary museums that more evenly interesting for an art to deal with, to research, to examine, and to produce artworks?
I mean, I feel like a little bit that I became this artist that is invited to, decolonize the museum, to like do something with the collection. Preferably the same artwork that I've done before, which is, we'll see a little bit of it. I don't know if you might have seen it. It's this work where a tightrope walker walks on a tightrope balancing with artworks. And that's what that was the work shown in the same Venice, and that's the work that everybody knows. And every time I'm invited, they're like, oh, can you just do the same with our collection? I was like, can't repeat, but let's talk. And I think, like, to be honest, it's the same thing that happened with this Lausanne museum. So it's both. I wouldn't say it's only contemporary art museums, like everybody wants now. But it's also, you have to be careful because like you then might become this institutional artist, institutional critique artist on demand. People are just kind of, just do something so we're more contemporary. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, order, or artists of order. But funnily enough, like a new commission that I'm doing right now for Frieze Museum, because I had just had a big show there in Leeuwarden in the Netherlands, it deals with that. And I call it in my head like a ruler of desires. And I'm making various works on that ruler. Like, for example, one work is the perfect work for the collection. It's bronze. It has to be only exhibited in the offices, so it doesn't require special temperature conditions. And on the other hand, I'm exhibiting, I'm writing like several chapters of a novel with a writer about how artworks get commissioned. So it's like all the desires of an institution and potential desires of an artist. So it's exactly about this system of commissioning in order to decolonize a museum of sorts. Yeah, I think that answers it. This is a work that I've done together with my partner, and it's called Superhero Sighting Society, because I have also an alter ego who's a superhero, and we're going to end with her, with Super Taz. And Superhero Sighting Society is... a lot of things are invisible there. They're actually audible. So what it was, we've collected stories about very small heroes around the world, but we didn't take, for example, North America or superpowers connected to military complex, like, I don't know, X-ray vision or like laser finger shooting and things like that. We've taken heroes like Super Taz, who's super strong, for example, Super Sohrab, who's a superhero in Iran, but he doesn't have any superpowers. He just wears a costume, so like sometimes succeeds, sometimes fails, but just gives us a much closer image of masculinity to our contemporary life. And other heroes, like for example, there's a hero called Burqa Avenger from Pakistan who kind of fights for the girls' rights to study. And one of my favorite also is Apostrophizer. It's this guy that somewhere in UK kind of removes apostrophes from street signs, fighting for the purity of the English language. But basically, with every hero that we collected, we've commissioned another layer of fiction with a writer, Jessica Saxby. So we wrote another story about that. So for example, we invented a group called Anti-Apostrophizer that brings back the apostrophes, trying to kind of return the unruliness of the language. Another hero that we found is called Carrier Pram Ranger in Tokyo, who wears a ranger costume and helps people carry their prams at one particular metro stop in Tokyo because there's no elevator there. But we invented a story from a perspective of a shop, of a rental costume shop owner who kind of finds this costume, cleans it up, then this guy comes, buys it, and he's very suspicious of him, but then kind of he sells it anyway, and then he sees him doing it and sends a report to Superhero Sighting Society. So all of these audios that were in the space, 5 channels, there are these audio reports of these kind of very small heroes who chose to do something differently, but on kind of this level, ground level up. And they were all in different languages because like native languages to the heroes, because it was important, this moment of recognition. In the central Paris, you walk in, you hear someone speaking Urdu, speaking, I don't know, English, Filipino, Russian, Chinese, Japanese. So this was the audio. element of it. And then the mountains that you see, they were done by Supertaus as a scenography, and these are actually unclimbed mountains. I mean, I was quite surprised myself that there are still unclimbed mountains in this world, but apparently there are quite a bit. And alpine climbers call them last greatest problems. So I was quite, because it is a landscape. It is a landscape of little heroes that we wanted to do with that particular work. This work is called Charivari, and it was commissioned by Yarat in Baku. And for a while, a circus, and like especially Soviet circus, was a very kind of interesting place for me. I mean, I wanted to be a clown as a child. I mean, part of that fantasy worked out, I think. I wanted to do something about the circus for a while, and the work basically ended up having 3 elements: an installation, a set of impossible-to-wear costumes, and an audio piece written by amazing writer Sasha Smigirov. And the name, the word Charivari refers to kind of, it's a term from circus when there's this performance when everybody comes on stage. Somebody somersaults, somebody breathes fire, somebody, I don't know, spits frogs, and whatever happens in the circus. But also it relates to kind of these masquerades and parades that sometimes happen in rural areas in Britain and France, as I read. So that's the installation, and you see kind of it's almost like a carcass of a circus. It's almost like a maybe backbone, maybe something that you could find an archaeological dig, like kind of these leftovers of what you could have seen. And the way we work, like we worked a lot with the archive of the Baku circus, and some of them are copies from the archive, from kind of real elements, some things we came up with. And these are just some archival images that we sift through. And I really like this kind of animal-friendly circus, to be honest. This image is quite important for me because it comes from a video from 1968, National Circuses, that I found in the Russian State Photographic and Film Archive, because we often go there to kind of research things. And it's Nazirovo family acrobats, but there were kind of different performances. There was a performance by Rabadanov, Vijakurbanov, tightrope walkers group. There were these acrobats, then there was this clown from Uzbekistan wearing kind of this Uzbek costume, laughing at the kind of more European-looking clown. So that film I found when I was doing research for tightrope, and it kind of led into this work as well. So kind of some of the base material I later, years and years later, sometimes gets reused or redigested into a different work. These are some of the sketches for the costumes. We worked with a very good designer, Pani Kazirevia, an acrobat. I call him a disco ball man, but of course he's also like a spaceman, because a lot of the scripts written for Soviet circus were based on space programs. You'd have like Sputniks at the top of the ceiling and so on. Clown, pants, strongman, master of the ceremony. And master of the ceremony is very kind of transformative, Lego-like costume, kind of everything comes off bit by bit. I call her a curtain woman. She's an animal tamer, kind of very velvety. Tightrope walkers. And here they are in the space, because they were kind of hanging on the side of the costumes. But as I said, impossible to wear. And we're going to listen to a short excerpt from that audio, because as you were in the space, you heard these various stories.
Dear friends, we extend to you our very warmest welcome. A whole host of maestros of the circus arts will be taking part in our festive carnival and circus performance. All will be costumed accordingly and will perform alongside trained animals. You will witness the extremes of human ability, violations of the laws of gravity, and transgressions of accepted ethical norms. You will hear sparkling, unforgettable dialogues between man and beast and man. Parading before you first will be dozens of athletes, stunt motorcyclists with banners flying, followed on the backs of bowed acrobats by plastic lion tamers, keeping their charges on a short leash. Approaching the royal box, they will hand floral bouquets to the respected elders and prominent spectators. Emerging next onto the arena will be pyramids of inflatable elephants. Standing on them, hippos. Standing on them, poodles. And on them, a giraffe. Once they leave the arena, numerous inflatable flamingos half filled with brandy will be released into the sky. All this will no doubt be rapturously received by the visiting public. Musical accompaniment will be provided by brass fanfares and a group of harpists. The creative abilities of the trumpeters and harpers will be warmly received by the audience. Then, mobile platforms will be rolled into the arena, adorned with garlands of fresh flowers, lettuce, coriander, parsley, and trained Baku tomatoes, as well as sturgeon caviar. If you've never heard of such tomatoes before, you soon will. As you all know, the main property of Baku tomatoes is to disappear. They can disappear better than anyone else. No magician can rival them. Here they are, and then you look again, and poof, they're gone. Only sturgeon caviar can be compared with them when it comes to the mastery of vanishing acts, due to its similar talent for instantly dissolving into space. Our trainers have achieved amazing results with Baku tomatoes and sturgeon caviar. Not only do they disappear now, they've reached a point where they don't even appear in the first place. Nobody except these trainers has ever even seen a tomato with caviar. The axles and all moving parts of the floats will be smeared with crude oil to avoid squeaking. Special sprinklers will spray a mist of pomegranate juice in all directions. A very healthy natural beverage, saturated with vitamins A, B, C, and E, and rich in iron, calcium, potassium, phosphorus, and magnesium, as well as folic acid and antioxidants. All this will surely be greeted with great enthusiasm by the visiting public. The audience will be presented with acts performed by synthetic bears, a talking horse, a lion ventriloquist, a touchy sheep, a strong woman accountant, 2 elephants, and 1 big top king kong. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, on with the show.
So it's like, and then you meet all these also figures, you know, and you end up in a canteen when everything is made from crude oil, because we did research and there was cosmetics produced from crude oil, and there are some research papers that kind of think it will be eating crude oil at some points, because it is kind of animal remains, which could have just been brewing for a long time in a way. And so, and also kind of, if you think kind of about an excerpt that you've heard, there are these strange phrases of everything will be warmly received by visiting public, because now you don't ascribe reactions to the public, but these kind of excerpts are taken from these Soviet scripts for circus performances, and then you hear that, you know, sprinklers will sprinkle pomegranate juice on the audience, and you can imagine this whole like little drops of pomegranate juice on people. So it's it gives you different images, I don't know, of power or of circus, and yeah, there are kind of many stories and many pokings and things within the work, I would say. And this is actually another version of the work, which is now on show at Jamil Art Center in Dubai, where I have like a big solo show now, which is maybe like a retrospective or survey of the 13 years of my practice, that's what they call it. And we've done a version of the work, and I call it flat pack version, where everything is flat, because we couldn't get the works in time, because my previous show was ending after this one opens. So we kind of made a version which became flat, and new costumes, new figures started populating this circus, but they're also like all based on I don't know, snake woman that you sometimes see in a circus, or this kind of mix between a parrot or a horse and things like that. So also very often the works are modified as we go along. That is a work called Aesthetic Experience, and I've done it for Lyon Biennial, and when I was doing research in Lyon, I was very seduced by kind of French crinolines, the silks, the ribbons, and everything like that, and that's how the work came into being. But another thing that happened to me, I ended up in a local school, Lycée Martin Diderot, where I was really mesmerized with the way costume design students studied, because they would make like a collar of 16th century, then they would make like a crinoline, and then they would make like another structure of a skirt from like 1860s, and it was like almost, and in the same fabric, so it almost looked like time traveling through shapes and through skill, and yeah, through kind of knowing how to create these geometric, I don't know, so-called abstractions, I suppose. And I started researching. One of the first hot air balloon flights was also in Lyon. So it kind of started coming together and became a hot air balloon, at the base of which were these crinoline structures and like fake ass structures and different other types of padding. But also for another reason, I suppose, because I always viewed them as, you know, kind of obstructing, non-feminist and like uncomfortable. But I found like a record of a woman who lived when sort of crinolines were invented. And she talked about how it was a very different structure to 20 layers of skirts that she used to wear, because it had like a metal carcass, it was much lighter, and how it protected her from like sexual sort of assaults in the public space. And that's when I kind of rethought about it, that, oh, it's actually like a house, you know, you kind of walk along and you're protected. And it transformed in my head and became this like, I don't know, balloon, or like these shapes of protections of your body, or sort of choice to be, I don't know, protected or removed in some way from space. And also at the time I was trying to think, how can I make an object that tells a story, that tells a history of, I don't know, development or craft or something like that. And yeah, that's what basically happened. And this is actually a shot from Leeuwarden, from Frieze Museum in Leeuwarden. And so there was hanging much higher than in Lyon. Another work called Quantitative Infinity of the Objective. I don't know if it might be kind of recognizable, maybe the shapes, maybe maybe something else. So I started thinking about it from several directions. First, I was quite bad at physical culture in school. Like, for example, I could never climb this like resin thing that like a lot of my peers succeeded in. And then, it was just kind of a difficult thing for me. So I started thinking about that. Then I started thinking about what these sports equipments became later Olympic competition sports. So I only took those things that could potentially be in like your physical culture, and then became a sort of Olympic competition. And then we modified all of them. Like, we extended them, broke them, like curved their legs. And another reference of that curving were these outdoor gyms. I don't know, you probably also have them here. And I like the kind of, very often that sometimes you go and you see they're bent. And this is like that should never be bent. So I like this impulse of like bending them, bendable. Well, like inverted commas. So what the work was, it was these modified sports equipment. It was performers, a Balchiklu, amazing dance and sort of performance group from Kiev, because the work was realized there as part of Pinchuk Art Prize. And also an audio piece, 6-channel audio with different sort of passive-aggressive phrases that were collected in institutional surroundings, private, or just maybe sometimes what we might have heard throughout our life. And we can just watch a short excerpt from the performance.
Why are you writing that?
What for?
To see the elders. Because you're growing.
I'm so disappointed in you.
Because I said so.
You never think about yourself.
What do you want from it, so what do you think that behavior is going to achieve?
I don't care.
It'll work out if you just listen to your own.
When I was your age.
It's too early for you to think about having kids.
There'll be plenty of time to be married later on.
You'll see once you've had a baby grown. You think you're all grown up, do you?
You can't make a small decision for yourself.
Think for yourself.
And if they judge of you, would you do that too?
Be more like...
Be more like...
I've had enough of you.
Being grown. you don't appreciate what you've got.
So yeah, well, it was 20 minutes of that, but also kind of it's this collection. It's like, am I talking to a brick wall? You're a girl, you're a boy. Don't do this, don't do that, and it's something that kind of you accumulate throughout your life, and you have to work through a lot to kind of stop hearing that at the back of your head. And to me, kind of these bodies that were doing something, these were the bodies that were able to digest it and move on. So, for example, when you saw the work without the performance, it just became so dark. It was just like, I mean, like, since we collected it, me and my studio director, we were already kind of resistant to that language at some point, when you kind of like have these hundreds of phrases that just kind of twist your gut. You develop some resistance. But basically what that darkness of the work resulted into is that when I showed the work next time at Yokohama Triennial, first of all, we worked with gymnasts, and that's a very different body to dancers. Like, they have very different relations with these machines, but that's kind of a different story. We also commissioned an illustrator, Shari Santa, to draw, to combine illustrations from Soviet and Japanese manuals, who would hint at that flexibility that would be sort of missing when the performers weren't there. But you can hopefully see a little bit in these sort of seemingly funny collages. And this is how the work is shown now at Jamil Art Center, that we've done it with sort of stencils on the walls. Another work called Dear RKSMACSKIGA and so on. It's tripods, but it's a kind of mimicry of tripods, because they can't be moved. They are, I don't know, sculptures, I suppose, because I wanted to hint at the possibility of movement, but have no possibility of movement. And on top of them, there are traveling speakers. And it actually relates to a conversation that I had with Rasha Salti. She's a curator. And she said that she travels with her traveling speaker because she listens to a specific radio every day, and that grounds her. Because kind of, I guess pre-pandemic, in the art world, you would kind of like travel all the time, and there was no way sort of to ground yourself or to attach yourself to a place. And that's how this traveling speaker emerged in the work. And then as you sort of walked around, it sounded first like a cacophony, but then as you went closer to every speaker, you would hear a second phrase from an email when people apologize for not being on time. Like, I'm sorry for my late reply. I was stuck in a battle with the windmills of my past mistakes. I'm sorry for my late reply. No, it was a very good one. I'm sorry. I don't see why I should even apologize. I have friends, family, and you're not a priority. So there's kind of not being in time on one hand all the time, but also having a different timelines. Like, for example, to make an artwork, you need a very different timeline, which sometimes really differs from external demand, biennial schedule, or like exhibition schedule time. And we could just listen a little bit to the imitation, how it sounded in the space.
So sorry for the delay, but I was travelling. I'm also sorry for not getting back in touch with you. I telepathically sent you a message, but not at all.
Dear, sorry for the delay again, but we are very short-staffed right now with a departure, a death, and a birth.
So some of them are like very earnest, you know, someone's passing, but some of them are like, oh, sorry, I didn't reply. I was like, I ended up drinking, and then I was in a casino, and then there was 5 a.m. Like, and next thing I know, like, I'm missing like 5 of my work meetings. So yeah, kind of some sort of lag, various forms of lag, I suppose.
I see that in several of your works, you leave a lot of space for imagination of the audience, for the experience of what they cannot see. So is this the space that interests you in terms of communicating your artwork with the audience?
I think so. It's also like, you know, kind of, it relates to a question like, when people don't read your ideas, what happens? And you're like, that's it. you let go. Like there are moments when you let go of the work, and also if there's no space, if it's so hermetic and it's so on the wall, like what is left? What is the investment from the audience, and what is the thinking? And also it's about kind of, it has to do with the question like, how do you treat your audience? Do you treat them as like understanding everything you do? And that's how I approach it. I don't change kind of levels for like to increase understanding or something like that. To me, kind of we're speaking the same language, and that's essential. Like not even the same language. Sometimes kind of people go much deeper and in directions that you haven't thought about, and that's the letting go of the work. And also, I'm very interested in this moment. I don't know if it's evident in kind of a lot of works or not evident at all. I'm very interested in this like laughter and seduction, and then you think what you're laughing at. So I quite like this like luring people in and then being like, oh, but what is this actually doing? Yeah. So this was a very time-indulgent work, because at the time I was also thinking, like I did them together actually with a very short space of time, this ASMR spa and Dear RA and so on. I was actually really, I don't know if any of you are into ASMR videos. It's these videos that you watch on YouTube with headphones where people like, I don't know, face massage or like wash your hair, and it's very relaxing and gives you like some tingling sensations. And I think maybe more people got into it with the pandemic because it was a form of companionship. My favorite ones were like this, what is it? Direct attention. There's like a category like that, or like care videos. When you know, there's one that like, yeah, okay, never mind. TMI. So anyway, I was interested in that, and I was interested in sort of breaking this intimacy barrier. Like what happens in this imitated intimacy in ASMR videos. So for this work, me and another amazing artist, Alexandra Kutavoy, we made a spa. We made a spa, and you could book a facial. And during that facial, you actually got a real facial, which costed like a real facial because the Liverpool Biennial had to pay performers. You also heard a script written by David McDermott. And as you had that facial, you also laid, it was almost like it's a broken sculpture. So there's a cheek, there's a bit of hair, and there's a neck. So these are the pieces of a ginormous broken head, Greek head, that you often often practice on in the academy to like draw over. So you kind of lie on this face, and you're getting this facial, and you're hearing different stories about artworks that disappeared through history of art. You hear stories about the beautician who tells you that she has mere synesthesia, this kind of heightened empathy, and that's how she knows what you're feeling when you're getting that facial. Yeah, and she also narrates that she recently had a client who was a restorer, and he came because he wanted to feel what his paintings feel when he restores them. So there were kind of a lot of narratives there, but it was very much about, yeah, this empathy with art and this mere synesthesia with art. And working with with another artist who is so grounded in sculpture, it was also very curious because he talked about 3 different surfaces in the work. He talked about sort of like antique, sort of like archive, historical surface, and then a prehistoric, which is this kind of rocky, and then a surface of Euroremont, he calls it. I don't know if, like Euro renovations, which is like, you try to make things well, but you sort of like fail. It's kind of smooth, but it's still not. So, yeah, in these objects, yeah, there were also kind of these 3 phases. And all the cosmetic products, and this is one of my crazy favorite parts, were made based on sculptural processes. There was a cleaning clay cleanser, metal-infused toner, scrub with a mineral granite, then wood massage oil, then this mask that you would take off, and the last thing was cream that was made especially. That main ingredients were linseed and cotton extract, and it's basically if you make an oil painting into a cream, that's what you get. So you kind of go through these like sculptural processes, then you absorb a painting, and then you leave, and you hear kind of these stories on artworks that disappeared throughout history, and almost like these ingredients of disappeared artworks are in those products on your face. So it's like a complicated loop, but the curious one. Ring Road, quite a simple work. The work contains a contract and it's based on something that one of my friends, Ahmed Ugood, does. He very often incorporates contracts into his practice. And basically it was commissioned by an art fair, called Moscow Art Fair, because it was Artist of the Year in 2018. So it's this beautiful mountain with a circular road and a contract, public offer that if you'd like to own this object, you have to commit to building the circular road around the mountain. And next to it, there was a budget that we calculated for about 1 million euros. So in a way, to me, it's a work about serious relationship, and it's a proposal that will always float in the air. So it's about kind of relationship with market, with, I don't know, people that support art, and sort of, and also about, like, to me, it's an offer of hand in marriage that will never be taken. And it's good that it will never be taken, because right now you can't build a circular road around a mountain as an artwork, because it just kind of ecologically doesn't make sense, and there are gestures like that being done. So it always becomes this floating proposal, at least in my imagination. This was in the Kaunas Biennial. They showed this work at a train station there, with a piece of a budget. I have actually several different practices. I'm part of the group called The Unbound, but we won't talk about that today. But I also have a food-related practice. And this is a cake of a Caspian Sea. It was my first food work that I've done in 2014. And I'll show you what video it's based on.
1942 года. Самодовольные мерзавцы еще не знают, что им готовится в Сталинграде и на Кавказе. В своем бандитском воображении они уже видели тот жирный пирог, который достанется им после похода. Их галицкие ноздры уже чуяли раздражающий запах бакинской нефти, запах неслыханных борщей и военных выгод.
So this is not a work, this is kind of just an archival video which I accidentally found in my favorite archive. But as you sort of watch it, you see that there's not sort of a single frame with the kind of generals and the cake in the same frame. So it claimed it was from German propaganda, but probably it wasn't. And I was really mesmerized with the direct metaphor of like consuming geography.
Их галицкие ноздры уже чуяли раздражающий запах бакинской нефти, запах неслыханных борщей и военных выгод.
So basically my work was just kind of I reproduced a cake and I served it based on what characters people wanted to eat. This is the work that I referenced earlier, but kind of that is now made me triggered these invitations of decolonizing collections. It's called Tightrope, and the main star of the work is Rasul Bakarev, who's a 5th generation tightrope walker. And we'll watch a short excerpt from it. This work was shown in Venice the same year that Baida was there, but Baida nobody saw. Basically, it was just kind of it was a label at the end of one exhibition, and then a video on a YouTube channel. That was that. And then this was in the main pavilion. We can just talk over it a little bit. So it's 58 minutes in total, and he takes along, I think, 52 works, if my memory is still there. And all of these are copies from the Dagestani Museum of Fine Art, and they're all been selected based on an article by a local art historian, Janina Dagirova, who basically is the only article that has an overview of the whole history of art of Dagestan. And then we picked one artwork for each artist, made copies, and kind of he takes them along. And on one side, they're structured by size. On another side, there's this cube, which is almost like a metaphor of museum storage. And I think there are several things in this artwork. It addresses the question of invisible histories of art and what has to happen for them to become visible. And invisible in what? In like a narrative written by, I don't know, MoMA or other museums and so on. That's one thing. And then another thing, I guess that I was thinking about is just a personal fear of an artist of when you make something, will it make it into art history? What does it mean? Like kind of, will it be saved and will it survive? And so kind of also personal doubts that every artist has when making something. But also kind of maybe to give you a little bit of the background, the way I thought about the work is because I was angry, because one of the museums was forced to move into a new building within like 1 week's time. And this is a period where, kind of even the works during wars were evacuated for longer times. So it's just like, how is this possible? Like, how can culture be treated as like service? Kind of, I think we're serving kind of, and keeping things with our bodies as opposed to that. But well, clearly that's my own opinion.
So I would like to thank you for this work because it reflects very much to the people working at museums are thinking about. Is that this is what we can't communicate to the wider audience. This is what is invisible in what we do. That sometimes in terms of restoration practices, in terms of transporting an exhibition to another place, to renovating spaces, but endangering like artworks in various situations, not ensuring the wider context of what can happen.
Yeah.
So I think that this is especially appreciated by the people working in museums.
But it's also like, because it is very much about body being the last support structure. Like, because also I was thinking about museum collection keepers that kind of work with like 200 euro salaries, but they love these works so much, kind of, and make do with the means of support that they can make do. So it was very much kind of about their bodies as support structures. And there's one more small work that kind of deals with that in a more direct way. These are just some references from Rasul Abakarov's family archive, because I have a small book which was published by Moose Publishing in BC, and one of the reasons on this particular work, and one of the reasons I wanted to publish it was for their archive, like family archive, to be visible, because I think it's quite incredible. That's his great grandfather walking between two moving trucks. These are also some archival images that kind of became something else. Going back to one of my favorite museums where I grew up, because my grandmother was a director at the Dagestani Museum of Fine Art. This work is also based on that. And it's copies of 3 objects from the collection. A wedding bracelet that the bride would wear in Kubachi village only once in her lifetime and would be passed on like female line. A salt box, which would be carved by the owner when the owner would buy it. So it's like almost ritualistic opening eyes of an object, and it kind of has some pagan references. And this whirlpool is a design where like evil spirits should be lost, and it was a salt box, so kind of main preservative. And Gmayun, the prophetic bird by Viktor Vesnitsov. So these are 3 artworks that I've chosen from the museum and made them into marionettes that. And then there's an audio where they tell their stories, so a little bit kind of more life into, I guess, museum collection. And we come to kind of last person that we're going to meet today. It's Super Taus, superhero from Dagestan. That's her passport issued by NSK State, and that's another art group who kind of founded this virtual state. She was lucky enough to get a passport. And Super Taus appeared when she met Super Sohram, a superhero from Tehran, who I mentioned before, who doesn't have any superpowers. But that's kind of the beauty of reality, of masculinity that kind of has to be made more kind of closer to people, I suppose. And she was born super strong. And she lives a parallel life, because it's also quite curious with artists that have alter egos. Sometimes they don't share consciousness. They would download consciousness and then forget what the other one did when the other one was active. Me and her, I mean, she actually claims that I'm her alter ego. I claim that she's my alter ego, and kind of she lives the life that I was supposed to live, but I'm not living. So she works as a kindergarten teacher, studied philology in the Dagestani sort of pedagogical university in Makačeva, and we'll watch one of the first things that appeared online. And this is a viral video that was shot on a video registrator by accident when she was driving, and then it sort of like circulated. I found it on some funny websites where people were discussing like what happened. But yeah, let's just watch a minute and then. I mean, she's also an homage to like a lot of my female relatives. They're just gonna get on with it, you know, like just do it. So yeah, and clearly he's still a museum worker, so just get on with it. But that's a separate thing. And also kind of I'm paralleling her with this work. Endeavor in 2010, where like for 9 minutes I push a rock and nothing happens, and then 4 years later she comes along, and also she kind of came along in 2014. Kind of, it's funny that these people and these works erupt very often at like moments of like deep helplessness, and that's also kind of I think that's an interesting thing to know maybe about how some artist works. And last, I think, thing that I'm going to show is actually about the museum workers as support structures. And it's a story about 2 invigilators, Maria Karkmasova and Khamisat Abdullaeva, that prevented a theft of a Rodchenko painting from one of the Dagestani museums. So a thief in the 90s came in, cut out this Alexander Rodchenko abstract composition from 1918 and started running. Habisat noticed it, told Maria, and Maria kind of ran after him, and like, I don't know, she snatched it back or convinced him to give it back. But obviously, like, they received no bonus. No, even the newspapers that I found at the time wouldn't mention their names. They would say like, oh, police stopped it. Another newspaper said like Adil Khan, which is the only male worker at the museum, stopped it. But I interviewed him and he said like, no, it wasn't me. It was like them. So Super Taus, when she found out this story, she decided to create a monument in their honor, bronze, kind of good, solid stuff. And she took it into different institutions. Like this is her taking it around Pompidou and trying to find a good spot for it. On one hand, you sort of like entering a canon of history of arts and finding a space for a different type of labor. Huh? Bring your works. No, that's the difference. I have like something called our communal agency because we mostly bring our own works to save on shipment, but that's like. Somebody actually told me in Moscow, one of the museum workers, she said that there was a collection keeper, when she saw like a statue falling, she kind of ran to catch it. And we're talking like marble. And it's such a beautiful impulse to like just kind of like...
To save.
To save, yeah. Like because you're so close to these works. Yeah, basically, so that was that. And and she also kind of took it around Makačeva and Moscow Museum of Modern Art. So she kind of also tried to find a good place. And there's Lenin Square there, so she tried to find a good place in many spaces, but in the end didn't leave it anywhere. It just exists as documentation of attempts. And that's actually the museum where they worked. So it's like there was a full homecoming. I think on this note, we should end. Thank you so much for your time. And yes, please, questions if you have.
I have questions. Yes. To go back a little bit to relate to our exhibition here, is to one of the key questions that we raised during the contextualizing our exhibition, the questions that raised up when we were thinking about this exhibition is what can art do? Like in terms of course, contemporary art and political art is always critical and analytical to social crisis and social issues. But do you believe that there is a concrete space for the artist to do actually something to achieve something?
I mean, I definitely I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't believe in transformative power of the art. But I think it's also it's a transformation on a very one-to-one level. But I think that's not less important in a way. And we were talking today about kind of numbers and visitors, and I think sometimes I try not to think about numbers, but to think about that one message on Instagram from somebody who saw the work and who was touched deeply. And it also kind of relates to my own experience when I see art. It's almost like I see work, and it's almost like somebody's taking me by the hand and taking me somewhere where I could have never entered without this. So it's this travel, which in no other way you can make. And it's this sort of empathy, it's this, book that you can take because you can become a migrant. It's it's so important what you said today. It's take, you might need it. And this is it's incredible. It's scary, but it's incredible that it's like this and everything can shift. And it's very good to realize it and very good to kind of just adjust your empathy and adjust your understanding to, I don't know, like build a different world. Because mining serendipity is also about different ways of navigating the world. I don't know if it can change life, like if it can change policies, if it can work on the grand level. I think I've made a choice to be on this level and have kind of a smaller conversations, but to me they are like very important conversations.
But I believe that from my perspective is that we can't change societies, we can't change reality, but if we can inspire people to think or to rethink their positions, then we already achieved something.
Yeah, no, exactly. And basically this is my experience with so many works. Like there was, who was this artist, Letter to Unknown Pilot. It was in the Beirut, in Lebanon Pavilion, Akram Zatari. Incredible work, but also like I'm quite a sobby person. I cry a lot, like when I see good art. So like it really influences me. But yeah, it's just kind of, it gave you a very different image of war. It was a story about a pilot who had architectural background and refused to drop a bomb on a school because he recognized it was a school. I mean, somebody, like there was a next one who did this. And I don't even know if the whole work was fiction or not, but it just tells you so much about potentiality of agency and of your own kind of refusal and responsibility and so on. So like, I do believe in that change. Would it matter, like, does it matter on a grander scale? That's a different story, but it definitely matters on this floor.
Yeah, and what do you think, I mean, the European or even wider migration crisis that happened like a couple of years is like an ongoing historical story. So it happened like for several hundred years before, always more or less. So when do you think there is a specific time where artists should be active in terms of their responsibility? When are those stories universal? And is the crisis, the moment of crisis when it's happening, the most significant, or in terms of what is your opinion about in terms of time of reaction?
I mean, I think everybody decides for themselves. There's no should. I can't describe to anyone what they should do. I just know like what I do. I know that sort of Supertaus appeared also at the time of like annexation of Crimea, because I felt so powerless on like wider in the wider scheme of things. But that's like kind of a story that like the artwork does what it does in a way, you know, on one hand. So in my reactions, I don't really believe in one-liner reactive works. I can go myself in a protest, that's a different thing. My political position is my political position and it's there, you know. But kind of, I just believe that if it's a fast work, if it's a one-liner work, it's just not a very good work for me, in my judgment. It just doesn't do anything. It's the same thing as a protest, but then a protest, it's your position, you do it. And that's where it's valid, a one-liner is valid. But in the artworks, I feel like it has to have a deeper conversation, has to be more multi-layered, it has to do much more than just a proclamation of position. Proclamation of position can be in your social and political space. That's where you proclaim.
Okay. Maybe somebody from the ako neko još ima pitanja, slobodno. So thank you, Taos, very much for coming and for